Good morning. I want to welcome you all to our Fall 2022 Ethics in Financial Management, specifically ethics within the government sector. My name is Dominic Savini. You've already read about me, my bio, and all that, I assume. If not, don't bore yourself. It won't tell you much. What tells you more is how I've structured this class, patterning it after Professor Smith, who's done an outstanding job. He really has. It was easy for me because he laid a wonderful foundation. I have made some tweaks, some which I believe are essential due to the changes that we see in government. And I think the overarching change is trying to bring a bit of more current realism into the classroom and asking you through your papers to deliver realism back to me. Ethics is not an intangible. It's a core. It's a core, or it forms the core of who we are. But before we go a little too far into that, this is a kind of a welcoming video to our first module, where you had to introduce yourselves. And the class is different from last year's class. Last year's class, I had a lot of younger, inexperienced people, more international students, so it was different. The tone of some of the threads took a different flavor. The international students viewed things a bit differently in the sense that they've seen a great deal of corruption, especially in countries like Africa and Russia, and even in Brazil. And that spurred some of them to want to fight against it by becoming, let's say, a CPA or a financial professional within government. So that was a different flavor for some of the Americans, especially the younger ones who, I hate to use the word, are a bit naive, haven't been in the workforce long enough. This class is different. There are fewer of you who I think haven't really worked. Most of you work. Most of you work in the accounting profession, a lot of you within government. Some of you could be very well teaching this course and have taught ethics before, as I read. So you've got a great experience base here. So what I'm going to expect on future threads, do not write long threads, okay? Do not copy and paste. And I know the different applications or websites you can go to find content and do a copy paste. Some of you may know or have friends who took the class previously and may ask them for a copy of their threads. Don't do that. I mean, that's the first thing. You don't want to plagiarize. You want to use your own words. And you want to be brief. You want to be succinct. I do want you to understand the theory in the text, but in the threads, use your own words, to try to describe and when you source information. So the other point I wanted to note was you really need, for ethics, where we fail as a profession, because I think Teresa mentioned that she believed ethics is fairly ingrained in the profession overall. I don't want to disagree with you, Teresa. I don't think it is ingrained. And I don't think it's ingrained because it's not ingrained within the people, within us. If we don't get ethics right in our own personal lives, nothing's going to change. That means you have to practice ethics at home and on the job. And you have to hold yourself to a higher standard. I'll give you two examples from last year's class, okay? These came from the journal entry posts. One student mentioned that her parents, without getting into detail, they might have been, free-spirited folks. They might have been into drugs. I don't know. But the parents at their core were very selfish people. And raising her and her siblings, they always basically took the tone, do what you have to do to get ahead. Whether it's lying, stealing, cheating, it doesn't matter because it's a dog-eat-dog world, and if you don't do it now, someone's going to do it to you. So she, growing up, had this dilemma, and probably still does to some degree, because what was ingrained in her was, hey, it's okay to lie. It's okay to cheat. You're just trying to get ahead. You're just trying to get your fair piece of that great American apple pie. And she confided and she said, I know what my parents taught me were wrong. Now I have to undo that. Another student wrote, and I was quite surprised, and she admitted to an adulterous affair that she had with a man that ultimately resulted in the destruction of her family, at least the first family. Then she remarried later. Now, but she didn't remarry her lover. What happened was, in that case, her husband had cheated on her. And in retaliation, she said, you know what? I'm going to get you. And she did. But it destroyed her marriage. She wrote and she said, I saw how destructive my behavior was, because even though I might have divorced him, I didn't have to put us through all that pain and the children and the suffering that, kind of befell on the children. And she likened it to, in a way, she walked away from her religious faith that talked about forgiveness, and she quite didn't know how to deal with it. So from these two stories, I'm not to tell you more, this is what you have to do in this class. You're almost going to be psychoanalyzing yourselves, okay? And you've got to be brutally honest. Crystal got what I said when I said we all have a price. And that price depends upon a lot of different factors. But even I have a price. There's a price that I would sell out for. I think I know what it is. I've thought about it for a lot in my life. What's your price? And don't tell me you don't have one. And don't tell me, okay, that like Superman or Wonder Woman, you will stand the test. You might not. What is your weakness? You know what it is. You know what tempts you. You know what you will do in certain situations because you can get away with it. Ethics in the public sector deserves this introspection. It was, I think, Gary who said, we come to the table with biases. We all do. And our job, as Gary wrote, is to mitigate those biases or those weaknesses, to make them stronger, to avoid them. Then I want to ask, who was it that said, well, a couple of you, Ernia. Ernia said she wants to further develop her analytical skills. Ernia, that's easy, okay? What I think you may have meant, or if you didn't mean it, this is what I think you should be more concerned about, are your critical thinking skills. I've been having conversations with people now post-pandemic about what we've seen, the censorship in the media and in social media against alternate opinions on the COVID response to the government. There's more and more literature coming out. Investigative reporters are finding that, some of these voices should have been listened to, but they were silenced. Now, people who look at things through a political lens or a religious lens only are not critically thinking. And you should not be afraid of dissenting opinions ever. So be open to being challenged in what you believe is right. And think for yourself and make that decision. Don't let others tell you what's right. Okay? That's a start. But you've got to wonder, why are they telling me what they're telling me? And those of us in the government sector, we understand the political pressures from the appointees, whether it's a mayor, whether it's a secretary of an agency. They want us to do certain things. Okay, we'll do what we can, but it's going to get done right, ethically. And sometimes the bureaucracy, that's what we are, right? The bureaucrats, the functionaries, the technicians, the accountants, we have to push back. But will we? That's the question. And when we don't push back because we're afraid of our jobs, losing our jobs, or being, blacklisted, if you will, aren't we also guilty of unethical practice? And we don't see wrong being done and we just turn the other cheek, or we just turn a blind eye, I should say. Alba mentions that where she works, she sees how ethics is strengthened through stringent policies and periodic training. And we're going to cover this later on in the course. That's all good, but it doesn't stop there, does it? Let me ask you, you can train and have policies that are strict rules like the Ten Commandments. But why didn't my student from last year, for example, who unfortunately went through that divorce, if she were to abide by the strict commandment of don't commit adultery, why did she ignore it? There was a weakness, there was a hurt, there was a pain. She wanted revenge. Those are the biases. So understand that just because there's a stringent policy or training, that's no guarantee. Oftentimes, that's what we call papering over, making the system look good, but really, there's corruption underneath. There's problems underneath, okay? Anita has some wonderful experience. She's city manager, has seen a great amount of growth over there down in Frisco, Texas, great barbecue, I bet. She's witnessed fraud, as many of us in government have, both state, local, and federal. I've seen it at the local level. I had a cousin of mine involved in a very large scandal. Now, it wasn't a close cousin, okay? Very large scandal that involved the governor of New Jersey. And at the federal level, I could tell you stories. I was personally bribed, and I had a former deputy, went to prison for 4 years. And when I tried to bring things out, they didn't like me. They crucified me, you see. But that's what happens to whistleblowers. But that's what makes us strong. That builds character. And Anita, maybe she can share with us in some of her posts. And Gary as well, who's got a lot of experience. Argenis, you've said that there are times that you've had to remind people that certain actions are wrong, and I applaud that. That is what we need. Now, we don't need a busybody on every job or on every team, right? Or what do you call them? A nosy person, right? But if you see something wrong, you should say it. When I was younger in my career, I worked in an office with all men. Some of the guys would pass around what we would call, gentlemen's magazines or videos, or they would use foul language. Well, I didn't like that. I mean, of course, I'm a guy. You know, I'm attracted to all types of aesthetic beauty, but when it came to the vulgar behavior or language, I would say, hey, look, can you guys cut it out at least in front of me? I don't want to use certain names, in vain, and I don't want to use any F word, And they were pretty good about it. And sometimes you need that. And it's different than saying, I'm going to go file a complaint or I'm going to sue you. No. The best thing is to try to deal with these things informally, right? You approach the person privately and say, hey, look, it's okay, but I kind of didn't like that you use that language or that you're talking in a certain way. So at least around me, if you don't mind. And I think every office needs a soul or a conscience, right? So Argenis, thank you for reminding that. That's what we do need. Gary, I already addressed his comments. Were spot on. Please take a look and read them, okay? Melanie, you also mentioned compliance with laws and regulations, okay? Congress, we have a Speaker of the House who says she complied with laws and regulations regarding insider trading. But yet, it seems that more and more certain members of Congress get insider information and they're able to sell securities, buy securities, and become even wealthier than they are. So, let's be very careful. Just because you comply with the law doesn't necessarily mean you're ethical. Okay? There's a difference, very big difference, and that's what we're exploring. IPEC, you want to develop a better understanding and to develop your own ethical model. Well, I say to you, IPEC, you already have an ethical model. Are you willing to change it? Okay, are you willing to dig deep like that young lady last year and said, my parents really messed me up. They taught me some bad values. I've got to unlearn those. Are you willing to do that? Because you already have a framework, okay? We have Michael. Michael also, like Anita and probably Gary, have seen cases of fraud and witnessed abuses of power. So maybe Michael will share with us some of what he's seen. In my experience, at the local level, I worked for the township of Irvington, New Jersey, for a while as a CPA consultant. And the former mayor, Sarah Boast, and I, along with the town council, were involved in a couple of, one was a negotiated bond settlement. And to make a long story short, though, she asked me for kickbacks. And at first I didn't understand what was going on. But to make a long story short again, she went to prison, I didn't, because I didn't play the game. We've seen abuses of power, okay? And it takes all forms. So I'm hoping that, Michael, you'll share with us your stories and also the resolution, because what I was going to say was, with the exception of that situation with Sarah Bose went to prison, all the other cases of abuses of power, Michael, that I've seen, and fraud at the federal level mostly, with the exception of my deputy who did go to prison, he finally got caught. Not based upon any of my allegations, they were ignored. He actually had to steal and get caught stealing over $1 million from the New Orleans Housing Authority, and that's when they nailed him. But most people in government get away with this, and that's been my experience. They get away with a lot, especially in Washington, D.C. I hate to say it. I think here I call it the culture of concealment. Shandi, I hope you do get a better understanding of ethics. Elizabeth, you say you think you already have a pretty good compass, and I do, and I believe you do. and I sincerely mean that. But as a devil's advocate, I say to Elizabeth, when was the last time you were seriously tested? Were your ethics seriously tested at all in your life? Now, if it was, and you were able to overcome it, you've succeeded. And you know that you're stronger. And you also know how to help avoid, like Gary is telling us, mitigating the biases and the weaknesses. So I caution anyone who thinks, I got a good set of ethics. Because we're all going to say that, or at least most of us are. But you don't know. It's like Martin Luther King Jr. is quoted as saying, a person's integrity isn't revealed until they're under pressure. It's when the pressure is on that you know who you are. Not when you think, but when you're under pressure. Sophia, I think you got the right idea. You're looking to improve. And like IPEC, I just ask that you be open to tweaking anything that you might have adopted that might not be best for you or best for public service, okay? Claudia again shares that she's come across issues of unethical practices all the time in her audit work. And that's good. I mean, good in the sense that you're uncovering it, right? And that's what auditors are supposed to do, make recommendations to, fix the significant deficiencies or the material weaknesses that exist. And that's an important thing. Gulshan works for the New Jersey Turnpike Authority. Now, Gulshan, I have to admit, I've got a relative that works for the authority. I'm not going to say anything other than there's a long history with the Turnpike Authority. It is a creature of government, as we know, and you probably are aware, like I do, that there's some unethical practices in every industry, right? But peculiar to the authority. I'm not going to go any further because I have a relative that works there. But understand, whenever you have a government or even a contracted operator doing work for taxpayers, people look at that as, free money. What can I do to get that money? Do I hose up the time cards? Do I double up on the overtime? Do I charge a premium? What do I do? And believe me, they do it. The paperwork's great. The paperwork's perfect. The subcontractors or the contractors they're using all have ethics programs. Oh yeah, let me tell you, you really, I think we're seeing more and more. This pandemic has revealed how corruption exists in government, at the federal government for sure, all the way down state, local, but also within media. We see how it's been very, very, now that we can critically think more, right? Challenge more. We can see there's some holes that need to be fixed. But those holes, again, are within us, okay? Teresa, we've already mentioned that I take a bit of a different view regarding the profession and its ethics, okay? I don't think it's ingrained well at all because there are not enough courses like this, okay, to focus on the individual. And we often hire people just on technical ability or the grades out of school or a GPA, and we don't really hire them for the moral compass that's within them, okay? And that's part of the problem, our recruiting and hiring processes. So keep that in mind, Teresa. Maxine, you're so right. One bad apple can spoil the whole bunch. And that's why I go back to Argenis' point that it's good to remind fellow coworkers and managers, hey, we might be deviating from our ethics, okay? So it's important. You're right, because you let one person get away with something on your job, what do you think that does with the rest of the people? If you allow certain people to, I don't know, go to the office and take ink cartridges for their printers that they use at home, but you don't allow others, and that's a forbidden policy, what does that do? I mean, it kills morale. I mean, it's just bad. But we got a lot of bad managers out there. We got a lot of nepotism out there, as some of our colleagues are saying already. They've seen it. Um, and Lance, you want to do a deep dive with me? Let me tell you, I'm ready for that dive. If you want to go deep, the journal entries are probably the place to do it, to document it. But if you want to go deep with me on ethics, certainly we can talk about ethics and in the context of the course. But I think the deep dive really is best done with the others, because you want to learn from one another in the threads. Okay, so let's keep the threads real. Don't make them long, like this video, right? Oh, Professor Savini. Well, I wanted to take time because you've introduced yourselves. I wanted to talk to you about your posts. I really like them. We got a good class, a lot of great experience. Okay. If you have any questions, email me at Canvas. We'll deal with those things there. But in the meantime, don't underestimate the reading. And if you find something in yourself you don't like, or you kind of want to just ignore or excuse away, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Go after it. That's how you grow. You don't grow by excusing or rationalizing away behavior. Oh, everybody does it, or that's not bad. It probably is then. All it takes is just a little bit. A little yeast leavens the whole lump. And if you don't believe that, let some of your colleagues in class tell you their experiences. Okay? That being said, get ready for Module 2, get ready for reading, and good luck. And I hope to see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.